You weren't strong, you were surviving, and everyone mistook your survival skills for maturity, your hypervigilance for responsibility, your ability to suppress your needs for selflessness, and they praised you for it. They told you how mature you were, how responsible, how together, how much more capable than other kids your age. And you learned to wear that praise like armor, even though underneath it you were a child screaming for someone to finally take care of you, instead of making you take care of everything and everyone else. They called it strength when you stopped crying, when you learned to solve your own problems, when you became the emotional support for adults who should have been supporting you, when you took on responsibilities that were never supposed to be yours. And you believed them. You thought you were special, thought you were advanced, thought being the responsible one was something to be proud of. But really you were just a kid whose childhood was stolen and replaced with obligations that crushed you slowly from the inside, while everyone applauded how well you were handling it. You don't know how to play because playing was a luxury you couldn't afford when you were busy making sure everyone else survived. You don't know how to be silly or spontaneous or carefree because those things required a safety net you never had. You don't know how to ask for help because you learned early that you were the help, that your role was to solve problems, not create them, that your needs were secondary to everyone else's crisis. You're always scanning the room for what needs to be fixed, always anticipating other people's needs before they voice them. Always jumping into caretaker mode automatically because that's the only role you know how to play, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting to never be off duty, to never feel like you can just exist without being useful, to never be able to rest without guilt flooding in and telling you that rest is selfish when there's always something that needs doing, someone who needs taking care of, some problem that needs solving. You feel guilty when you enjoy yourself because enjoyment feels like abandonment of your post, feels like you're failing in your responsibility to keep everything running smoothly, and you can't even pinpoint where that guilt comes from anymore. It's just there, embedded so deep in your nervous system that it feels like truth, like cosmic law, like if you stop being vigilant and responsible for even a second, everything will fall apart, and it will be your fault. You're the friend everyone calls in a crisis, but you can't remember the last time someone asked how you're doing and actually waited for a real answer. You're the reliable one, the strong one, the one who has it together, and you've played that role so well for so long that nobody, including you, remembers that it was never supposed to be your role in the first place, that you were just a kid who needed protecting, and instead got promoted to protector before you even understood what you were protecting anyone from. You don't trust people to take care of things, because you learned that if you don't do it yourself, it won't get done or it will get done wrong, and you will have to fix it anyway. So you just do everything yourself, carry everything yourself, and then resent people for not helping, even though you never actually ask for help, because asking for help feels like admitting weakness, like proving you're not as capable as everyone thinks you are, like confirming some deep fear that you're a fraud who's been pretending to have it together, when really you're just as lost and scared as you were when you were 8 years old, and suddenly responsible for things no 8-year-old should have to think about. You're hyper-independent to the point of isolation. You've convinced yourself that needing anyone is weakness, that relying on anyone is setting yourself up for disappointment, that the only person you can truly count on is yourself. And this isn't strength. This is the armor you built to protect the wounded child inside, who learned that vulnerability gets punished, that needs get ignored, that the only way to survive is to need nothing from anyone. You don't know how to receive love without feeling like you owe something in return, without immediately calculating how you can repay the debt, without wondering what they want from you. Because love in your experience always came with conditions, always required you to be useful, to perform, to earn it through good behavior or emotional labor, or taking care of the person who was supposed to be taking care of you. And unconditional love feels like a trap, because you don't have a reference point for love that doesn't require payment, for acceptance that doesn't demand perfection, for being valued just for existing rather than for what you can do or provide or fix for other people. Here's what actually happened to create this specific wound of forced adulthood. And it's not your fault. It was never your fault. You were a child in an impossible situation, and you did what you had to do to survive. The adults in your life, whether through addiction or mental illness, or their own unhealed trauma, or just plain selfishness, abdicated their responsibilities, and you filled the vacuum because children are wired for attachment, wired to do whatever it takes to maintain connection with their caregivers, wired to adapt to their environment, no matter how dysfunctional that environment is. And when the environment requires you to be the adult, you become the adult, not because you're mature, but because your survival depends on keeping the family system functioning, and you're smart enough to figure out that if you don't step up, everything collapses. Your brain, still developing, still forming its fundamental understanding of how the world works and what your role in it is, encoded the message that your value comes from your usefulness, that love is something you earn through performance, that rest is dangerous because catastrophe happens when you're not vigilant, And these messages became the operating system that runs your entire adult life. The invisible program that determines every relationship, every choice, every moment of guilt or anxiety or inability to just be present and peaceful because your nervous system never learned that peace is safe, never experienced the luxury of childhood, which is supposed to be a time when your only job is to grow and play and be protected, while adults handle the hard stuff. The truth that explains everything, the truth that will either devastate you or liberate you depending on whether you're ready to hear it, is this. The strength they praised wasn't strength, it was trauma response. It was a child's nervous system adapting to an environment that required adult-level functioning to survive. And every time someone told you how mature you were, how responsible, how capable they were, essentially praising you for a wound, celebrating your loss, applauding the theft of your childhood as if it were a virtue, and you internalized that praise, you built your entire identity around being the strong one, the capable one, the one who doesn't need help. And now even when you desperately need help, even when you're drowning, even when continuing to play that role is killing you slowly, you can't stop, because stopping feels like losing the only thing that makes you valuable, the only thing that makes you worthy of taking up space in the world. The adults who should have protected you made you the protector instead. And that reversal, that fundamental betrayal of the parent-child dynamic, didn't make you strong. It made you hyper-vigilant. It made you unable to trust it, made you carry a weight that was never yours to carry. And you're still carrying it decades later. Still scanning for danger, still anticipating everyone's needs. Still believing that your worth is measured by your utility, still terrified that if you put down the weight, if you admit you're tired, if you finally let yourself be the child you never got to be, everything will fall apart and everyone will leave, and you'll discover that without the role of caretaker, you're nothing, you're worthless, you're unlovable. So what do you do now when you're an adult who never got to be a child, when you're exhausted from a lifetime of being strong? When you're finally ready to admit that the praise was poison and the maturity was survival and the strength was actually just a little kid doing their desperate best not to drown. You start by grieving, by acknowledging that you were robbed, that you lost something that can never be replaced, that other people got to have childhoods where their biggest worry was homework or friendships, while you were worried about adult problems that no child should have to think about. And that's not fair. That's not your fault, and you're allowed to be angry about it, allowed to feel the full weight of what was taken from you without rushing to forgive or understand or make it okay because it wasn't okay. It will never be okay, and pretending it was okay is just another way of protecting the adults who failed you instead of protecting yourself. You practice putting down the weight by starting small, by delegating one task you would normally do yourself, by asking for help with something even though every instinct screams that asking is weakness, by letting someone else take care of something even if they don't do it as well as you would, by sitting with the anxiety that comes up when you're not in control and reminding yourself that you survived by controlling everything, but you can only heal by learning that you don't have to control everything. That disaster won't strike if you rest, that you're allowed to have needs without earning the right to have them met. You give yourself permission to be bad at playing, at resting, at receiving, at being vulnerable, because these are skills you never developed. Parts of you that got frozen in time when you had to grow up too fast. And it's okay to be a beginner at things most people learned in childhood. It's okay to feel awkward and uncomfortable and like you're doing it wrong, because learning to play, learning to rest, learning to let someone else carry you for once, these aren't things that come naturally when you spent your formative years carrying everyone else. You reparent yourself by giving the child you were the protection you never got the permission to rest. You were never granted the message that you're valuable just for existing, not for what you can do or fix or provide. And this isn't about blame, isn't about making the adults who failed you wrong. It's about finally making yourself right, making your needs right, making your exhaustion valid, making your anger justified, and actively choosing every single day to prioritize your healing over everyone else's comfort, to prioritize your rest over everyone else's expectations, to prioritize your peace over the role of caretaker that you've played for so long. You forgot it wasn't actually who you are. It was just who you had to become to survive. You grew up too fast, and that wasn't strength, that was loss, that was theft. That was a child being forced into a role they were never meant to play. And every time someone praised your maturity, they were unknowingly celebrating your trauma. But now you know better. Now you know that real strength isn't growing up fast. Real strength is finally giving yourself permission to grow at your own pace, to reclaim the childhood that was taken, to be vulnerable and needy and imperfect and still worthy of love, to put down the weight you've been carrying since you were too small to carry it, and trust that the world won't end, that people won't leave, that you'll still be valuable even when you're not being useful, and maybe, just maybe, you'll finally discover who you are underneath all that forced responsibility, underneath all that survival mode maturity, underneath all that praise for strength that was really just applause for your silent suffering.